the best thing you can do is to help them heal and to help them start to find a love for learning again.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm Ella, your sometimes host, and today I'm so excited because I'm joined by Cassie Shepard. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, a little bit about you. You have 4 kids, you're Utah based, and you've been doing homeschool for a little while, and you also have a really popular Instagram channel, right?
That's right. Yep, you could say that. Yep, I'm over at Home-Centered Learning on Instagram, and that's my main platform. We have a website as well, homecenteredlearning.com, and it's been a great way to connect with other homeschooling families and something I've been really passionate about. So it's been a really fun creative outlet for me to have that space and also, create a community of like-minded mothers and families who embrace this lifestyle. So
Yeah, I love that. The first time I got to know you a little bit and I heard from you was at an event where you shared your story and kind of how you got started in this homeschool space. Can you kind of share a little bit about that and the experiences that you had?
sure, yeah, you bet. We started homeschooling. It was actually almost 5 years ago. It was November of 2019. We had started public school like normal with, I have twin girls at the time, and they were in first grade. And we just started the school year like normal. We didn't ever have any issues. And we did a couple of years of preschool, and then we did just a half day kindergarten at that point, and everything went really smoothly. When we got into first grade, we started to kind of see some red flags just kind of right out of the gate. And we ran into some issues. And the question kind of came up is like, well, what are we going to do? We met with the principal, we met with the teacher, and things just kind of started to evolve and change. And homeschooling wasn't really on my mind when we first had the issues. We were kind of looking more at like what it might look like to send our kids like maybe half day to school and just like stop after lunch or something, and we weren't entirely quite sure what it would look like, or do we anyway, we just kind of went through all of the options. But then I mentioned kind of what was going on to a neighbor of mine, and she's like, "Oh, well, have you ever considered homeschooling?" And I was like, "No, not ever, not really." But she just kind of planted that little seed in my heart. And the more that things kind of progressed, it was actually only like over 3 weeks as we kind of were exploring options and trying to decide what to do. We just felt like it was a spiritual experience for us where we felt like this was the right path for our family. And so we just kind of jumped in. We took a huge leap of faith and decided to pull them out and start homeschooling.
Yeah, was that a difficult decision? You mentioned that that was not on your radar before, and then this neighbor mentions it to you, and then I believe I was reading some of your things on your website, and you said that you wrote out like tons of pros and cons, and
That's
you
right.
were so surprised by how many pros there were to actually just fully pulling them out. What were some of those pros, and what was like the inciting point that finally made you make that decision, make that leap?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I wrote out our pros and cons. And I was kind of disappointed when I think some of the issue is we always just kind of do what's always been done, right? Kind of in front of us. And I went to public school, and my husband went to public school, and that just kind of seemed to be like the next step for our kids. And we haven't really sought any more beyond that. Education's always been really important to us. I mean, we have a history of I knew not all schools are created equally. I would do my research. I was probably a little bit abnormal when it came to researching schools, but it also just never occurred to me to do homeschooling. But as I started to make that pro and con list, when I really stopped letting everybody else around me like influence my thoughts, I was like, oh, actually, there's a lot of really good reasons to do this. Amongst those reasons were more time together as a family. That was a big part, right? Being able to customize our kids' education was another part. We had some things where I felt like my girls were advanced, and some of the things that they were doing in school, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. like, I didn't feel like they were really being challenged. Some of the other things that we just kind of felt like we needed to do was we wanted to travel, right? Like again, that goes back to family time, but we just had to have more opportunities. We were involved in some extracurriculars, and I remember asking the schools, like, "Hey, can I just pick up my kids like 5 minutes early every Thursday?" And they were like, "No way, you can do that." And I was like, "What? Like, these are my kids." And they're like, "It really disrupts the classroom." And I was like, like everybody's just getting their coats on, and it would just make things so much easier for us. But it was inflexible, right? Like some things little things like that. We just wanted to have a little bit more freedom. We wanted to be able to explore children's interests. That was something
Mm-hmm.
else that was really, really important to us. On my con list, my two top con lists, I remember thinking that they quickly changed. One was definitely socialization. I was primarily worried about socialization. Oh, and the other thing that it was is I was just worried about, I had just had a baby, and he was only 6 months old at the time when we pulled the girls out. And my biggest concern was like, how would I take care of everybody and make sure that my older kids are getting the education that needed, but also my baby? Because I had already, for a couple of years, I had already kind of like outsourced education, right? Where I didn't have to deal with that part. And so I could raise my younger toddler and my baby. And so that was a big concern of mine. But I quickly learned after just a few weeks, I saw my little girls, like the way that I always described it is they kind of felt like their light had gone out at school. And just within about 3 weeks, I just felt like they were beaming again. Like I just felt so good about our decision to bring them home and spend more time with them and give them the attention that they needed and the help that they needed, as well as I saw progress immediately. And we were especially, like I said, worried about socialization. And that kind of changed real quickly because COVID happened 4 months
Sure.
later. So the socialization kind of looked different for us for the first couple of years. But now that we've been doing it for 5 years, we feel so confident and so good about things. We love the opportunities. We have a great group that we do things with. And then I feel like my kids have thrived. They have lots of friends. It's like almost silly now. I kind of roll my eyes at myself because I'm like, that was silly to worry about it. But you just kind of do what everybody else worries about, right? That's what everybody always says about homeschooling is they're weird, socially awkward kids. But that wasn't the case for us. And then also, I realized how much I loved being with my kids, and it just felt like what motherhood was for me, like, and what it was supposed to be. It was no longer just kind of like surviving between doing the dishes and doing the laundry and all and cleaning the house, kind of some of the things that don't have any relationship, right? It was weird because I was giving the relationship and the most important part with my kids to somebody else to develop. And so when I brought that home, I quickly realized how much I loved being with my kids, and it was so rewarding, and I could see them progress really quickly, and I was like, "Okay, we're going to be fine. We're going to be able to do this."
I love all of that you just said. You said a lot of really great things right there. One of the things that I wanted to call back to, though, was when you were talking about how you were feeling whenever you were weighing these options, just as, the parent that was going to take a lot of the burden. You're the one that's responsible for making sure that these kids learn. You're the one that's responsible for making sure that they eat and that everything's structured, and that also on top of it that things are, clean and orderly in your house as much as you want it to be, and that dinner gets made, and like it's a lot of stuff that now you're having to juggle whenever you don't outsource the education part of it. What was your state like? What were you doing before? Did you also have to, you know, I guess quit a job, or were you already stay-at-home mom and now this was just kind of a transition? Because I also know that some parents have to make that decision. Am I going to take a back seat in my career to make this transition as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, we planned before we even ever had kids that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So for me to leave a job or anything like that wasn't something that we needed to change personally, but it was definitely the emotional weight. That's what I would say is, I mean, it feels very heavy to be like, oh wow, I have a lot for a long time on my plate. And honestly, it's not something that I feel like ever really goes away, right? Like and I think for me, I've learned to really embrace it because it's heavy and there's a lot, but then there's also a really high reward, right? Like, and again, for me, it's like I would rather have that rate weight and kind of bear that responsibility than completely not, not be involved in my child's life or kind of feel like that there's like a disconnect between us. Like I said, it's just it for me, it gave me what I always thought motherhood would be like, something that was like something I could find joy in. I think you almost kind of have to have that contrast where it's like before everything I was doing was just kind of shallow, even though they're all really important things. And then I just also found that I just love it. Like it doesn't feel, it doesn't, I mean, it's still hard. I don't want to like say that it's not hard, but it's like worth it. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Cause I love being with my kids and I want to give them the best. And we feel like having them home with our family is that. And I'll also say I have a friend this year that she did have to leave her job, right? And it was hard. But she said, I saw what was happening to my kids in school. And she said, we'll do whatever sacrifice we need to make to shift. She said that they had been, you kind of get into this reactive state versus proactive, right, in your child's education. And she said everything we were doing was reactive. And I was spending so much time trying to fix issues that she said, I need to change directions and take control and move to that proactive state. And I said, yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think there's always a sacrifice somewhere, right? It's just kind of depends on like, choosing and embracing what it is that you want.
Yeah, I think that's a very perfect way to explain it. You also mentioned that your kids, you felt like their light had gone out. What did that look like, and how long did it take for them? You said about 2 weeks for it to come back on. What were you doing? Like, what do you think was contributing to their light going out as opposed to their light coming back?
That's a good question. Some of the red flags that we saw and what I kind of felt like was where their light was going out was I think there's always, I want to say there's always a normal adjustment a period. And I had seen that. I also taught. I was a preschool teacher for a long time. So I see kids kind of in that first couple of weeks, there's an adjustment period. So I'm very well aware of that. And so when we first started school, we had done 3 years of preschool and a year of kindergarten, like I had mentioned. And so I'd gone through those adjustment stages, but this time the adjustment stage was like way more dramatic. They would come home or actually, it wasn't as much coming home to go to school. They were just in tears almost every single morning. The first couple of days were fine. I remember thinking it was about the third day and they were just like falling to pieces. Like, I don't want to go back. Don't make me go back. And I was like, it's okay. Like it's for us, I just kind of thought at that time it was the longer days, right? They were going from just a couple of, 4 years of a pattern of just short school days. And so the days were really long for them. So I thought, okay, it's probably just that you're having a really long day and you're tired and we're doing this every time, right? And it just never stopped. And we got into mid-October and I was like, this is far too long to be going through this stuff. And they started throwing tantrums that I hadn't seen them do in like years, like, like toddler tantrums. And
Mm-hmm.
my degree's in family life education. So I have a lot of experience in human development. And I also have experience working with trauma kids. And I just started to kind of see some of these red flags that I was like, I don't think it's normal that you should not care this or that you should be so disruptive, like, or they were disrupted. I shouldn't say that, but to have so much disruption in our routines, like coming home and kind of, having a hard time adjust things. One of the things I did was put a baby monitor in their room to kind of hear, they're twins, so they would play back and forth, and I would kind of try to hear what they would be playing. And I just kind of felt like when they were responding to some of the things that they were talking about that was happening in the classroom, I was like, I don't know if this feels like a very good environment. And my girls, one way that kids express themselves is, at that age, they were 6 years old, they can't verbalize a lot of the time their own feelings, right? And so you kind of have to look for some of these other behavioral signs like crying or tantrums that is completely out of normal. Like it's not their normal behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of these straight things are distinct. But another thing is, like I said, play. You can listen to their play. The other thing is to provide like art opportunities. A lot of the times kids might draw themselves like in a situation or something. And in fact, my daughter, I keep it posted nearby, but she was drawing like I was sitting right here at this desk and she was sitting right next to me and she was drawing this picture. And I looked over, it was evening and she was just bawling her eyes out. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is wrong? And she's drawing this picture, and it had all of our family together and all of these hearts. And it said 10 out of 10 on it. She had written mom. And I said, what is wrong? You're drawing this really cute picture of our family. And she said, I just want to be home with my family. I just remember thinking like, I'm trying to kind of suppress her feelings and saying like, oh, you'll be fine, go to school, you'll adjust, you'll get through it. And she just was like, no, I don't want to be there. I want to be home with our family. We had just had a baby, and that's when we kind of started to explore things and think, okay, like what other options could we have, or what could we do to have more time as a family? And eventually we homeschooled. And when we came home, I remember it was 3 weeks after she was drawing this picture, another picture. We were sitting at our little desk. Our schoolroom didn't look like this yet, but we were sitting at a desk that I had pulled out. It was dirty. It was in the garage. I just pulled off a cardboard box or a cardboard table or is that what it's called? Not card. Yeah, cardboard table, card table. You know what I mean? Like a lifetime table. um, so I just pulled it off, and we were doing school on it, and she drew this other picture, and it was snowing outside, but she drew herself in this little like red dress. And she didn't say it was herself, but she says the girl in this picture is so happy, and she's got snow and flowers in it. And I said, why is she happy? Why is this little girl happy? And she says, because she knows that she's loved. She knows that the Heavenly Father loves her, and that, and I just saw this like kind of this contrast of like, she just felt overwhelmingly loved, like that she was home now. And really after that, I just saw them start to thrive again. Their lights came back on. They completely stopped having tantrums. There was no crying. There wasn't any drama. They were just back to my little girls, just little happy girls that were happy to play. And they have been that way ever since.
Wow, that's an incredible story. It hits better this time than the last time I heard it. Um, so thank you for sharing. I think that's that is something that a lot of parents can relate to, is just watching their kids change over time, or seeing different things inside of their kids that they're just confused by, whether it be tantrums or whether it be some sort of an emotional state, and just having the curiosity to say, okay, what's going on here? Because this isn't normal, and it shouldn't be normal, And I think a lot of the time there's like this stigma around teens, like teens are just depressed, or like, there are just stages of life where you're a little harder. But really becoming curious as a parent and becoming curious as a family and saying, okay, it's possible that they're just going through something, but I would love to know what that is, and love to walk with them through that. So kudos to you for seeing those things, and saying, how can I help my girls? Out of curiosity, so I know that you use the good and the beautiful right now, right?
Yes.
Cool. So was that what you started with, or how did you start all of your stuff? Do you feel like you do, like some people talk about how they start with traditional school type of thing, and then they segue into more of like a flexible type of model for themselves at home? What does your schooling look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's definitely evolved over the last couple of years. I would say one thing that has been so amazing about this journey is I've learned a lot about myself in this process, right? It's been if I don't want to like put myself on a pedestal, but I feel like I've really blossomed because I've just loved it. And I've been able to try things and feel like I have the freedom to do it. Even when I like worked in a classroom as a teacher, you still have to do things very right
Mm-hmm.
ways. And I remember sometimes when I would write curriculum plans, I'm like, I don't want to do a certain activity because that would take so much time, and I don't know if it would be okay, or there was just limitations. And when I first started homeschooling, there's definitely kind of that fear that you go through, like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm homeschooling 5 days a week and kind of mimicking and following that same school schedule. And then I just kind of really quickly realized, like the first couple of days, I set my alarm at like 6 a.m. to make sure I got up and got ready and got everything prepped. And then like a couple of days later, I was like, I don't need to do all this. I can be a little bit more relaxed, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
did homeschool 5 days a week for the first year. I feel like the first year to 2 years was a little different than maybe I would have originally. I don't know, just because it was COVID. I wasn't really looking for like co-ops or groups or things like that because everything was pretty much shut down and we were just all kind of like, surviving in education together. But as I just slowly became more comfortable with things, I was able to let go of some of those kind of like preconceived notions of
Mhm.
what I was worried about in homeschool or what I wanted to do differently and start exploring with that and just kind of being able to be creative with it. And then also combined with the fact that I could do it differently with each of my kids. Like it was really fun to kind of experiment, see how the twins kind of learned, whether they learned better together or whether they learned better separate, or if we needed to do more hands-on activities, or if they, preferred different types of learning and things like that. And then as I've introduced my boys, I feel like things were totally different with them. Like they were like, I felt like I was like kind of learning all over again. One of the pieces of advice that I always love to share with new homeschool moms is it's very much like having a baby, like right about the time you figure out how to either nurse or use a bottle, and you finally feel really comfortable with that, then they're eating solids and they're putting food all over your face and you're worried about like the thickness of the food you're giving them, and everything changes, right? And so you kind of have to like adjust to these different stages that your kids go through. And I definitely felt like that. I felt like I was like getting it down really well with my girls. And then my boys were, they just learn a little bit differently. My next son was different than my girls, and he has different talents. And so, I'm still discovering those every single day. And again, that's one of the things I love about it is I feel like I really know my kids. I see different sides of them that I don't know if they would have ever saw if they were gone all day and somebody else was kind of working through some of the things that we do at home together. It's been such a joy at this point, and this style, I'm very eclectic in what I use. I love pulling from everything. I started with the good and the beautiful. I still love using them because it makes it really easy, but instead of following the lessons maybe as rigid as I did in the beginning, I love to just kind of take the lesson off the page and bring in other books or assignments or things, just kind of use it as a guide to help me, as well as some of the other curriculums that we pull from. We love using literature. That's a big part in our homeschool. My older girls love to read, and so we bring in lots of books and activities. And then, this year I feel like we're excited to do more art this year and be more creative in some of the things that we've been doing. So that's more what we've been focusing on this year. And that's the beauty of it. I have one son who absolutely loves Legos and engineering, and he just really thrives building, and we can give him lots of opportunities to do that and let him just experiment. He also draws a ton, and so he draws almost every single day, and we just let him be creative. We try to kind of, I feel like kids, their interests can kind of change quickly at this age, but if it's something that we kind of see reoccurringly happen, we like to provide those opportunities for them and give them some materials to explore those interests and see if that's something that they want to continue to learn, and develop
Mhm.
the passion for.
Yeah, I love that. How did you initially 2 questions. How did you initially find your kids' passions and start to nurture them? And then also, what does it look like to educate 4 children at once?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Both loaded questions. I would say as far as passions, that's a little easier. It's just whatever your kids show interest in. And sometimes I've had to like provide a couple of things. I often have done like sometimes they were more formal in the beginning. I'm a lot more casual now, is doing like homeschool interviews with them and just saying like, what is it that you love? And like, what is it that you want to see different done in our home? Just to kind of like to touch base with them. Right. I used to do that more formally at the beginning of the year, and maybe it again, like halfway through, just to kind of touch base. But now I just kind of do it periodically, like, is there something that you are interested in that you really want to learn? A lot of the times there's an I don't know, right? And I sometimes like, I mean, my girls, that for some reason that's been animals forever. It's like years and years of animals. But I also feel like just sometimes providing a feast of things and kind of laying out some ideas. I remember one time with my older girls, just kind of reading them a list of subjects and things. And I was like, and this was when they were a little bit older. They were probably 9 or 10. And they were like, no, I was just going through like all these things of just like odd subjects too. Like, no, that doesn't sound interesting. And we got to plants, which I don't think I would have normally in gardening. And they were like, oh, we just want to learn so much about that. And so they were excited to learn and study botany and study plant cells. And we got lots of books and hands-on activities, and then also some gardening opportunities and stuff in our yard. And we brought in YouTube videos and things that they loved, to offer and to support that. So that's, one way that we've encouraged some of that, right? The other thing, let's see, remind me of the other question.
How do you successfully educate 4 kids at once?
You have to be willing to adjust all the time, to try different rhythms, to try different, I always say that instead of like having a really structured schedule, again, this is more of like a public school or school type thing, is to like from 8 to 8:30, we do this. And from 8:30 to 9:45, we do this. And we have some rough outlines of where I want to be during our school day. I am a little bit more structured, I would say, than probably some homeschool families, but I do like to maintain a rhythm because I feel like it's good for the kids. They know what to predict, and they kind of know what to expect, and like when we're working on our core work versus when we're working on like independent work or interest-based work or things like that, right? But I do try to be flexible. But having kind of that rhythm established where it's like, we always have like a morning time, or we do a devotional where everybody's together, that we come together and kind of set the stage for the day. And then we talk about, we kind of have like, we talk about things like whether or not, what we're going to be doing, or if we have extracurriculars that day, or what's going to be coming, or we address issues as a family. Like, hey, I've noticed this is not working well at this time of day, or you two are arguing a lot. Like, what can we do to work through it, right? When we're not like in the moment and heated. So that's just a really good way that we always start our days. And then at this point, when I have 4 of them, I wake up in the morning. I always work with the youngest to the oldest. So my oldest girls have independent work that they can do. They know what it is. It's easy for them to do on their own. And they can have a couple hours of that. They watch like a math lesson, and then they do as much math work that they possibly can, right? So I work with my youngest son, who's in kindergarten first, and we just work through his work independently, together. And he doesn't have any independent work at this point. In kindergarten, I usually always have him, working with me. My second grader, I work with him next, and he'll do like his independent work, which is just very simple things. He does like a handwriting and a math page. He does a phonics book called Explode the Code. And so he'll work through those independently, and he knows what he needs to do. And then I meet with him, and we go through the rest of his like reading practice and the rest of his math lesson and things that I need to be like hands-on and teach with him, right? And then my girls, I will meet with them. It's usually either right before lunch or right after lunch, just kind of depending how our morning is gone. We come together and we go over anything that we need to do. Like we usually review their math together, and we do some writing practice or other things that we just need to check in on and see what's going on. And then after lunch, we usually do some kind of like family style lesson, right? Where we all come together and we do like a science lesson or a history lesson or an art project or something along those lines. And then after that, we just like let the kids, relax and play. But also, like, we try to keep the full home environment something that's always learning, that we're always offering opportunities for them to explore their interests, like I said, and be able to kind of just see what lights their fire, right? So that's
Yeah.
how it's working right now for us.
That's so, so, so great. You mentioned that you meet with each of your kids individually. Are you meeting with them in the same room? Like, are they coming to you individually? And then where are the rest of them working? Because I imagine
Yeah.
that it's kind of distracting.
Yeah, actually, we have a rule they know. And now that my 5-year-old's youngest, it took him a little bit. This is his first year doing more formal school. When he was a toddler, we would and I mean, that's a big thing. Toddler years are very different. I've been through them with all my kids, and I would let them play or have toys right here. So our main schoolroom, we do a lot of it here in our main schoolroom. This is the room I'm in right now. And when I do independently, I meet in the schoolroom with them. So the other kids, my girls, have desks upstairs that we have set up for them, but they do school all around the house. I would say sometimes they're up there this morning. They were outside on our front porch doing their math. My son, he was in doing his math. He was doing his independent work math book on our couch while I was working with my kindergartner. So, and they know there's a rule, like whenever I'm in here one-on with somebody, the rule is that you can't come in and interrupt, because it is a lot of interruptions. That was not the case when I had toddlers, because I would expect that's what is developmentally appropriate, right? Like, I wouldn't want my toddler to feel like he could come in and be with me. So I would have a lot more. I would always, so many days having a toddler or a baby on my lap or toys all over the floor while I'm trying to work with somebody. And he's just kind of push through the steps.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I imagine that it's so distracting, just like whenever kids are even close to each other at all, like siblings especially, they'll mess with each other, they'll talk to each other, they're distracting to each other. So yeah, I was curious about that. I'm gonna get to my rapid fire questions here in a second, but the last question that I wanted to ask you was about yourself. So you were saying that you love being with your kids and that it's taught you a new side to motherhood. It's it's been such a fulfilling journey for you to go on. Can you speak a little bit to that and like just especially for the moms who are struggling and or finding themselves challenged? Like what does that feel like? What have you found?
I love the idea that you can make this lifestyle whatever you want, right? It's very customizable. And so if there's something where you just feel like you're dreading, then maybe you need to change it, right? Like, and that's so beautiful about it. I feel like we don't really, many of us is how we've been raised is that there's so much like, well, things are done this way and we have to produce it this way. It's kind of that factory line production, right, of education. And so I've actually found speaking with some mothers is they have a really hard time even knowing what it is that they want for their family, right? So for me, when I first started homeschooling, is I just spent a really long time evaluating what I wanted my family to look like, right? Knowing that I'm a big part of the home and raising these little souls and feeling again that responsibility is I was like, I need to think about this a little bit more than just going out with my friends and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my toddler did this today. Da, 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 da. Like just kind of, I mean, there's a time where it's healthy to vent, but I also kind of found myself just getting wrapped up in a culture that I wasn't even speaking very kindly about my family. And I was like, this is what I've always wanted to do and my degree is in education and family life. And this is always what I wanted. And I think it speaks to women's natures, right? Like it's in our natures to want to nurture others. And so what is it that can help you fulfill that, right? And what's that vision? And I spent a long time just kind of pondering on that, meditating on it, kind of trying to decide what it is that I wanted to look for a family. And then I've created it, right? Like I've gone out and I've made it happen. Like I've done what I can to and I've of course learned things along the way, but that's the only way that we can ever learn something is by trying it. And there's times where I'm like, oh, this
Right.
definitely did not work. This is not what I wanted in our family. And I'm always reevaluating. There's times where I'm just like, oh, this is not the direction that I want us to be going. And so I'm going to shift gears and kind of help see and what tools and resources can I use to do that. So I think a big part is just figuring out what it is that you want and how to get there. And being willing to like let go of kind of like the expectations of everybody else around you, and the fear of what other people might think. I think that also holds a lot of people back from creating and being on that creative side versus on the again, it's more of a reactive side. Like, well, I feel like I've got to hurry and get all these workbooks done because if so and so comes over and asks my kid a question, I want them to be able to answer that question because I'm so worried that somebody's going to think we're behind or something like that. But it's so much bigger than that, right? Like, is that really what's best for you? Is that's really what's best for your child? And I think the biggest thing is also just again, I keep going back to this is relationships with your children, right? Like even above all the educations, a lot of the times, and I'm sure you've heard this, but we'll see kids, especially that have been in school systems for a really long time, they kind of come home and homeschool and there's just this disconnection between the family or the mother and the child. And so if you're all of a sudden trying to put a teacher hat on, your kid's like, you're not my teacher. Like for
Mhm.
9 years, it's been these other people and they don't like you kind of taking that role. And or you see kids come out of the system and they're just really, really like maybe depressed or kind of dark or have struggled or have been bullied or have really low self-esteem or things like that. And the best way is to not to come in and be like, well, here, I'm going to help you and help you as you're reading. And we're going to spend all day focusing on reading or your math because you're so behind in math. The best thing you can do is to help them heal and to help them start to find a love for learning again. I think it's psychology 101 that when a child doesn't feel secure in their environment, they're not going to progress. And so a big part of that as a mother is to make sure that you are enjoying your family and enjoying being with your kids, because they'll feel that and then they'll be able to start to heal or to thrive after that.
Great advice. Okay, so now we're gonna segue into our rapid fire questions.
Okay.
These are gonna be fun. I
Okay.
think you'll like them. Question number one: what are some of your favorite questions to ask your kids?
Tell me more about that. That's not really a question, but that's my favorite way to, like, if they're drawing something or they're responding to something and you don't know what it is. Like your kid's drawing a picture and you're like, "Tell me more about your picture." And that's that way you're not saying like, "What are you drawing?" Right? So I love to do that versus trying to give them, a specific, like, I'm looking for a specific answer. I like saying, "Tell me more about that," instead of specific questions.
That's a great one. Next question: what is your favorite story of something that really, really works for your kids? Maybe an example of like some learning thing that you do that they really love, or something that you've seen that just works really well for them.
Things that work really well are hands-on things, right? I bring in a lot of like hands-on manipulatives my passion has been early childhood education. And so things like movable alphabets, like letters that you can manipulate, sandpaper letters, little number boards and things like that. Those are things that I really enjoy using with the kids. And I feel like it works really well for early childhood, especially when they need more hands-on working.
I love that. Last one. So back to stories. When as you've taken on this journey, what is one of your favorite stories where you can just see your kids succeeding or lighting up or doing really, really well with this more flexible education model?
Oh, definitely, I would say hands down my little boy. I'm just starting my kindergartner, but oh my gosh, sometimes I think my 7-year-old, he's a wiggler and he's all kind of he's just always been like that since a baby, and I just think sometimes the whole reason we were supposed to homeschool was for him, because I just don't think he would ever thrive in a really big classroom with lots of kids. He needs a lot of one-on-one attention. He's easily distracted. He has a very, very creative mind and he thinks differently. He thinks outside the box. And I am so excited to see what will become of him, because he has the freedom to just kind of be himself and he'll think of things and you're just like, where did you think of that? And you know what? He surprises me the very most. Like I'll be talking to my girls about something that I would consider a middle school level and he'll shoot back. And I'm just like, oh, you're brilliant. Like, I just didn't know a 7-year-old could even do this. And I just love that. So it's been such a joy to see him become, like I said, just to thrive in this environment and let him just, like I say, just be himself and give him the tools and things. Like, we're really excited. Like I said, he just loves to draw and he draws all the time and he's always doodling. And we just love that he can do that. Like, he can spend all day and we have 100 notebooks we'll hand him. He just fills up notebook after notebook after notebook. And so we're like, okay, if this is what you love, go ahead and do it.
I love that. This has been so great and awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing everything. I will leave everything below. Is there anything specifically that you want to point people to or that where people can find you?
Yeah, just my website, homecenterlearning.com, and Instagram at homecenterlearning.
Sweet. Well, definitely go and check out Cassie. She's incredible. And yeah, can't wait to hear more from you.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.